So Susan, if I can kick off the conversation with you, please. In your opinion, what are the benefits to having a more diverse workforce and a more diverse leadership and board?
Yeah, thanks Yvonne. Look, I mean, we know now through data that's well established that companies that reflect the communities they operate in from a diversity perspective actually perform better, whether that's at the board table, the leadership table, or within the organisation itself. We also know they're happier, and we also know that the clients and customers are happier because they can see and relate to the people they get to deal with. I guess from my personal perspective, though, that conversation around diversity is now changing, and it's really about inclusion. So rather than thinking about bespoke different groups that we need to target, it's more around, can our people bring their real selves to work? Do they feel psychologically safe? And then can they feel comfortable raising issues as they need to so that they can be at work the way they are at home?
Rebecca or Deidre, have you got anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Only in the sense that within a workplace, it's a much happier and better place to be if you've got a diverse group of people. Otherwise, you're all same.
I think it's really important to have those diverse perspectives within the workplace. You get much more broad approaches to problem solving, and I think it gives the organisation a much better result within the organisation.
So do you think that it leads to sort of better decision making and better outcomes, for solving any potential problems, that diverse thinking? And
I think what it does is it just opens other views, and so that allows you to think outside the square, think about things that you may not ordinarily have brought to the table, and I think that's really useful.
Are you seeing a shift overall amongst New Zealand businesses, but also within the finance industry, to a more diverse and inclusive approach, as you said, to leadership and board representation?
Oh, look, absolutely. I think it's commonly accepted, though, that our progress has been somewhat glacial and we're picking up the pace now. And if we were to think about where we are in New Zealand relative to other countries in the world, most particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, while we started off really early and strongly for women, we've been lagging a little bit, and more in recent times. But I think that the pace of change has been brought about by a demand, and the demand is coming from the community and the stakeholders and the investors. And we're seeing it now coming through even funding flows, capital funding flows from the Northern Hemisphere, which are demanding companies to be demonstrably literate in this, and in some instances meet certain criteria before they can get eligibility for funding. And for the first time ever, we're seeing some of those covenants, including things around gender, inclusion and climate, which is really forcing the laggards to pick up their pace.
So it's a matter of that sort of setting the example at the top, and there is a groundswell, do you think, of other sort of businesses and things?
Look, I think good humans will always lead with purpose and do what's kind of right, and they'll do it because they're not frightened and they can see the benefits. Laggards have to be told, and laggards will catch up when they realise their capital funding costs are going to be more expensive unless they do. So in some areas we've done quite well. So the public sector has got good representation around inclusion, around that board leadership table. The listed company space is catching up. While our raw numbers don't look that great, we know the appointment numbers are looking quite favourable in terms of, at least for gender. We've got some work to do around ethnic inclusion, and we need to think about that. So again, using that word inclusion rather than just diversity is going to be the key to success moving forward, I think.
Yeah. And would any of you like to comment whether you're seeing any key differences between maybe the public and the private sector with these initiatives?
And the only comment from me would be that the public companies are almost forced now to actually disclose, whereas private companies do not have to undertake the same level of disclosure. So from that perspective, I think there is still a difference. And if you look at quite a few of the private companies that are reporting and in their boards and management, I would suggest that in general they would be less inclusive than public companies.
Yeah, so that issue of transparency and shining sunlight is really important, I guess. Yeah.
And I guess also from your comment, it's that push from overseas as well.
Yes. So we don't have a compulsory requirement in public companies in New Zealand to publish a remuneration report, which includes generally a diversity and inclusion. but if you're on the ASX, you do. We're starting to see voluntary disclosure of all of those things from the New Zealand public companies because they realise they want to be relevant to the audience in which they're raising capital and funding from. So you're starting to see, in the early stages, it was always led by the people who are good humans. Now it's actually led by everybody who's actually got an interest in a decent financial return, which is, not necessarily always the right way to have tackled a problem, but it's solving it nonetheless.
Yeah. How do you think businesses can encourage and support women in leadership positions?
So I think it's making sure that companies set up the frameworks to allow women to succeed, and that's probably quite individual to a particular person. And so don't be afraid when you come into an organisation and you start in a new role to I guess set out what you need from your own perspective, and I think organisations should support that. So whether it's you need a mentor or whether there is a particular area of leadership that you want to, get more exposure in, then you should ask for that. I think the other thing is just making sure you've got that support from your peer group and the person that you report to. And that they understand, what your contribution can be and where you can provide influence. And so it's having those open conversations and making sure that where you need support, you can ask for it and you feel quite comfortable to do so.
I guess women have traditionally been underrepresented in senior leadership positions in New Zealand and possibly in the financial services industry in particular, but really that has changed in a positive way, particularly over the last few years with lots of appointments of women to senior leadership positions in the financial services. I mean, with your background and experience, what's been your reflection, or if you look back, have you seen that journey, and that change, and a lot more women coming through in those senior positions?
I could talk quite a lot about that, but I'll keep it really short. So absolutely.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago in the late 70s when I finished school, right at the end of the 70s, and went to university. And the career paths that were put in front of us were quite narrow, even though we were encouraged to go to uni. But when I came out, I joined the ANZ Investment Management, and I was the first female equity analyst to go into their team. I stayed with the ANZ, and myself and one of the other grads were the first woman to go into the dealing room. And it was a really big deal for the ANZ to bring women into the dealing room. I do feel that we were somewhat of an experiment at the time. And it was the same when I moved into an investment bank. It was the first woman as part of those teams. And I still think that that while we have moved a long way, a lot of that middle level hasn't perhaps or doesn't yet reflect the diversity. But within Craig's, the team in the fixed income area has been all women up until late last year. And we're the only bond desk in New Zealand across the banks and the other NZX firms and the fund managers to have an all-woman team.
That's great. I mean, it's good to see it at that other side.
To see it at the other side of that. And I think, I do believe that given another 5 years or so, we'll see another monumental change start to sweep through as well.
Great. Susan, is there anything you'd like to add to, given your experience in the industry and across different industries as well?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, the career over many years has seen sort of different angles towards how women are treated, but also to our views of how we should be and what are the attributes of a firm and a brand, and then how we should fit. So it didn't necessarily just disadvantage the women in those early years. It disadvantaged anybody else who didn't fit a particular type that was deemed to be appropriate at that particular time too. So I think, again, Deidre passed the comment earlier about happiness. If you sort of release the tight binary definitions of what constitutes successful or the potential for success, everyone else can sort of be levitated. But I think in recent times, and what I would say to other women, like if you can try and do the job in front of you reasonably well, the opportunities are all there. And so I've actually found it at times to be almost an advantage. I've watched peers who have been more capable not be given opportunities because actually more latterly they're starting to look for those inclusion opportunities. So I do think look for the little bits of pixie dust and opportunity that sit in those moments, and I know that I've benefited from them.
So I think, in rounding this out, I guess what do you have any advice for women that want to progress in their professional career, whether that be a step up from a current role or even, wanting to get a seat at the boardroom table? Susan, would you like to tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think with all good decisions, you've got to start with understanding yourself first. So, what are the keys to happiness for yourself? And so what areas, when you want to have a contribution, what's your legacy, how's that going to fit? And unless you're inspired and excited by finding those areas, then I don't think you're ever going to be successful, because you'll never be motivated to give that discretionary effort. So I think first spend some time understanding yourself. Those areas, those big mega trends we're seeing across the globe, where be it sustainability, health and wellness, the geopolitical shifts we're sort of seeing, see which ones that motivate you most, and try and find the way to be relevant by finding the people that are working in those spaces and building relationships. So my advice would be understand yourself and then be quite purposeful and deliberate about the connections you make to therefore lead you down that pathway. And the most important thing is, always work with good humans.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, great advice and some great top tips there. I think that alignment with your own values and what you're passionate about, and yourself, Rebecca, would you suggest that that's guided you in your sort of career through how you've come through?
Absolutely. And I think that whole point about understanding yourself is so key. And I think for a long time, through my career journey, I perhaps didn't, and that didn't necessarily, I guess, push me down a path that I didn't want to go. But I think as you grow in your career and you understand yourself more, it really helps you. And the other thing for me, I guess, is I've always developed into roles whereby I probably wasn't quite ready for them, and so that I guess that push to keep yourself challenged and to step out of your comfort zone. What's the worst that can happen? And generally what happens is that, yes, it takes a little while to get into the role, but you develop so much as a person and in your career, and I think it's a really, you need to keep doing it. You need to keep challenging yourself, you need to keep learning. Yeah,
and I guess that's that stepping outside of your comfort zone a little bit. It's where that learning and development really happens, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Anything to add at all, Deidre? Have you got any top tips or for advice for women?
I just think for younger women, then they've got to be experience-led, which is really what you're saying. They might not know exactly where they want to go in the future and understand themselves fully. So you take advantage of every experience you can along the way, because that will help you.
Great.
And also that we're social creatures in general. And so therefore, you want to work in communities, you want to belong, you want to be part of it. So, help as many people as you're going through, because you just never know when that you're going to turn around and benefit from that yourself.
Yeah, bring people along.
And I actually think it's a great time for a woman to be in business and to have a career, because with the whole move to flexible working, it really fits a lot better with where people are, particularly on their, I guess, in their life journey. And so I think it's a really great move in the right direction.
Great, thank you. My last question now, I guess. We've had, we've all had male and female mentors along the way. Do we think as a cohort that women are supporting women enough in the professional sense?
I think it's changed, and I think it's really important to feel comfortable with the person that is your mentor. Yeah. So whether that's male or female, I certainly think that as a woman in a senior role, you have a responsibility to support other females, and I think it's really important to recognise that and make sure that you do give back in supporting other women and to helping them grow and actually develop their own careers.
So Deidre, do you think women support women enough? Is there anything you'd like to see more of or less of? Or?
I guess every woman's experience is different. But from my perspective, whether it's been inside or from inside Craig's or external, I've always found women to be very supportive, and my peer group especially so. You know, over the last 30 plus years. And I guess we're also at the time now and at the stage of the careers when it's really good to hopefully attract more women into both investment and into a career in finance. And so, you know, that's something that I would hope to be able to spend more time and energy on in the years ahead.
Look, I think happily that the women that I associate with are phenomenally supportive of each other. And I'm on the board of Global Women, and we've sort of grown that membership now. You know, years ago it was somewhat more, was smaller, and it was generally corporate women in there. We've pulled that out to reflect women across the country from all different walks of life and all different codes, and whether it's the arts or it's education or it's health, and not just the corporate side. And that we've now got 450 women who actively every day are searching for more leadership opportunities for other women, you know, roles kind of coming through. So I sort of live and breathe that each day. So to the younger women, I think at the point you made, make sure you build your own networks that power that up. But I feel very fortunate that we have an extraordinary network of women who've got each other's backs no matter what happens, sitting across the country right now.